Welcome everyone to HogvilleNET YouTube Live. It is getting late on, what is today? I think it's Tuesday. It's Tuesday. Arkansas Razorbacks have done it again. Men's basketball program under John Calipari continues to amaze. I mean, it's the top portal prospect in the country, the number one player in the portal prospect. If you look at the various services, he's consensus top three. CBS Sports has him number one. I've seen a couple other ones. He's second or third. Arguably the top prospect in the portal. And it's Johnell Davis out of Florida Atlantic, a guy we've been talking about for a while. Actually, I've been reporting since last week that this guy was on board as a private, silent commit to John Calipari and the Razorbacks. I was efforting as much as I could to try to get some photographic evidence that he was on campus this weekend because I heard that was the case. I couldn't figure out if he got in on Thursday, on Friday. Jonas Adu we knew was there, but we didn't have a lot of photographic evidence there. I got some of that later and tweeted some of that out. But what an amazing 24 hours when you start with Jonas Adu on Monday. It was Calipari's third Monday commitment since taking the job on a Wednesday, formally announced. Every Monday since then, 3 Mondays in a row, Arkansas's made a splash. Big Z off the board first. Carter Knox was the following Monday. Then yesterday it was Jonas Adu. But tonight, breaking late, it's become, I guess, official. And I still think the Johnell Davis situation's a little bit nuanced. Because now that the commitment's, I guess, public, I mean, I've known about it for several days. I told you guys there was some procedural stuff going on behind the scenes that told me this was heading this way, and it was a matter of time before it became public. But he's also on that early entrance list for the NBA draft, and that was put out, that was published today. And he's still, he hasn't withdrawn yet, to my knowledge. And so he's got till May 29th to do that if he wants to return to college and play in college. And so this commitment, while I believe it's valid, I wonder what the arrangement is with Calipari now that it's public to let him proceed to test the waters, because you've got the NBA Elite Camp, NBA G League Elite Camp coming up in mid-May. That runs 2 days and it spills right into the NBA Draft Combine. Some of those players from the G League Elite Camp, last year they brought 50 players for that, over 70 players for the NBA Draft Combine. But some of those players from the Elite Camp got invited over to the Draft Combine. And we don't know yet. Maybe Davis gets invited to the proper NBA Draft Combine. Even if he doesn't, he'll probably get a G League Elite Camp invite, in which case he can earn his way by performance into that Draft Combine. Those are just examples, workouts with teams, other things that could be going on, interviews. I don't know the nature of this commitment in terms of that. I've been told figures over $1 million. I've been hearing different numbers. The number seems to get higher every time I hear it. I had one source tell me thinks it's over $1.5 million. That's an astronomical figure to me for NIL, but I don't know that it's not accurate. But Johnell Davis is an Arkansas Razorback in terms of commitment now. Again, going back to last week, I think it already was that off the record. Now it's on the record. But we'll see, because with grad transfers, again, they sign financial aid agreements. Not only is the NBA draft a possibility, but players it's happened before where they sign that. They don't need any kind of release to sign them with other teams, and then it's where they enroll. And so to me, I'm not trying to be Debbie Downer here. I'm trying to explain this the best that I can. I've done this before, by the way, before it became public. I do feel better about it now that it's public, but also I don't know the nature of the agreement here between Calipari and the player. Does he leave his name in there? I'll give you an example of what happened to Eric Musselman. Justin Smith, who helped Arkansas get to that first Elite Eight, the transfer from Indiana. He was in the NBA draft pool. He committed to Arkansas. He signed the financial aid agreement. He enrolled in summer school, moved on to campus. And it wasn't until kind of toward the deadline coming up for him to withdraw formally to be able to return to college did he do that. So that was still an option for him to go pro, even though he'd arrived and started all that, was part of the team effectively, part of the program. So there's all kinds of little nuance here with a guy that's got his name in that is an early entrant into that draft. Most of the projections are he's a guy that, might go undrafted and get a two-way deal, a la Ricky Council IV, who, by the way, used his G League experience and the opportunities in the NBA games he had in the regular season to earn a 4-year, over $7 million, effectively a rookie contract he would have gotten had he been drafted somewhere in the second round. So you just never know what motivates a guy. But if Arkansas's, offering up NIL money in excess of $1 million for Johnell Davis, that may be just enough for him not to risk what might happen if he goes too deep and stays in the draft. Let's see how long he stays in there. Again, the reporting tonight is committed. I don't have enough information to know, is there an agreement already in place that he's going to withdraw from the draft soon? The fact that he was on that list again that came out today, the official list of early entrants, the fact that his name is still on there kind of makes me think he may stick around a little bit and see how that plays out. So I always want to preface a commitment like this is just a little bit different. But the fact that he is committed to Arkansas, I think, does say a lot. I think this is where I think the Razorbacks, where he'll play college if he doesn't end up going pro. You always keep an eye on that idea of a guy being flipped by another school because, again, financial aid agreements aren't binding, but it's a big deal. The number one rated player in the country, 6'4" guard, Florida Atlantic, led the Owls. Florida Atlantic, who saw FAU being delivered to a Final Four 2 years ago. This guy raised his game as a junior, put up production in the NCAA tournament that was exceeded what he had done in the regular season, and was, the driving force and among other good players, but one of the driving forces to get that team to a Final Four. And this past season, it was nothing but spectacular. 18 points per game, over 6 rebounds, 6.3 rebounds from that backcourt, 6'4" guard, nearly 3 assists, 1.5 steals per game, close to it. And then his shooting splits, man, I loved him. Over 48% overall field goal shooting, 41.5, close to that percent from three. That's elite. Anytime you're 40 or above, that's elite 3-point shooting. And then 85.7% at the free throw line. Also elite numbers there. So you like the splits. 35 points, I believe, and 9 rebounds in a 1-point loss in double overtime to 4th-ranked Arizona in the regular season. 26 points in a big win over then 12th-ranked Texas A&M at a neutral site during the regular season this past year. I think he had 19 points and 9 rebounds and 4 assists in a 9-point neutral site loss to a ranked, I think, 20th-ranked Illinois. So we know, I just threw out 3 games against high major programs, several that, all of them were ranked in the top 20, and the kind of performances he has. So he wasn't padding stats. And the American Athletic Conference is a good one. He was co-player of the year in that league, by the way, this past season. I went through his statistical numbers. Some of the games, I think he had 12 games or 20 or more points. In his junior season during the regular season, I think it was against Alabama Birmingham, where he actually had his career high of 36 points, so a little 1 point better than the 35 against Arizona. This past season, his 4th year at FAU, in addition to the Arizona game where he had 35, he had 2 other games where he scored 30 or more points. So, I could go through the resume over and over again, but the idea is based on postseason play, based on percentages and efficiency, based on volume, based on checking a lot of boxes. And then the eye test, watching this guy play, he's hard-nosed, he's skilled, he understands how to create shots at all 3 levels, beat defenders, put pressure on defenders, and then he's a willing passer. He reads situations well, and he makes good decisions. There's everything to like about this addition for Arkansas because, look, we're going to talk a little bit about the situation with Jonas Adu and Brandon Garrison, how that played out. I've done some tweeting and reporting on HogvilleNET about that. Interesting stuff at play there coming out of the weekend. But then Johnell Davis, this is big news for Arkansas again. Keep an eye on the pro situation. Let's see what comes out in terms of his sticking to staying on the pro path for now. I think that would be, if he could get drafted high enough, I think he would want to do that. I just don't think the projections there. And then it would come down to performances in some of these mentioned the elite camp, combine. Does he get invited to one or the other? I would think if he doesn't get invited to the big combine, he would get invited to the elite camp and then have a chance to get into the combine. What kind of workouts can he get with teams? But again, I think this is a guy that's probably looking at, based on feedback to this point, maybe an undrafted deal that he has to work out, and maybe that leads to a 2-way deal for him. But we've seen guys make that work. But if Arkansas's NIL money is somewhere in the neighborhood of what I'm hearing of north of $1 million, that's a reason to go ahead and stay in college and try to improve your draft stock with another year. Stick around and see where that goes for you. But again, this is, arguably the number one player in the portal. I think he is because of some of the things I mentioned. But it gives Arkansas its sixth commitment. And if you look at the last 24 hours with Jonas Adu and now Johnell Davis, you went from having Big Z as your first guy out of the portal from Kentucky, following Calipari here, but a guy who was a freshman last year only played in 15 games. He showed a lot of promise, but only 15 games, 11.7 minutes per game. And then you got two McDonald's All-Americans and another top composite national top 25 5-star. When you start talking about Carter Knox, Boogie Fland, and Billy Richmond, 6'6", 6'6", and Fland at 6'2". So you have some quality high school guys, but no college experience. We know the portal is crucial now for coaches to build experienced rosters. And I think when you look at the last 24 hours with Jonas Adu, who was played through his junior season at Tennessee, the number one team in the SEC, arguably the top defender in the league, was all SEC, all defensive team, second team all league. Jonas Adu, 6'11" center, athletic, long. He really can be a menace on that front line defensively because he can get out of his area to make plays, alter shots, block shots, get rebounds, finish above the rim, finish in transition, finish in a half-court set, getting behind the defense, finishing lob passes. But you have to account for him, and it's hard to do when you put good quality around him. You talk about Dalton Connect as being that bucket getter and a lottery pick coming up or whatever, SEC Player of the Year and a first-team All-American. But you put a scorer like that, and here's Johnell Davis now in the lineup with Jonas Adu. And you've got a guy that's played 4 years at Florida Atlantic and only got better every year under Dusty May. I was shocked that Johnell Davis was not at least an honorable mention All-American this past season. He was that kind of guy. And again, co-player of the year in the American Athletic Conference. But now you've got bookend veteran guys out of the portal. When you start talking about frontline with Jonas Adu, that was Calipari's number one priority. He was one out of this portal on the front line. Johnell Davis, number one priority out of this portal for anybody that was making an attempt in your backcourt. He got two number ones basically. Because, Adu's rated top 10, top 15, depending on the service in the overall portal anyway. Davis at the top of that. So you basically, you got two players everybody wanted. And look, for Davis, it was Arkansas and Kentucky. Arkansas beats Kentucky for this player. There were some other schools involved in there. It came down, it was going to be those two. And then it was just Arkansas. And that was information I had late last week. I came on here, one of those segments I did last week, and talked about him and three other guys who were on board and commitments should be coming soon. We saw two of those already. This one, Jordan Burks is the other name, another Kentucky transfer in the portal who nothing's been publicly put out there. It's probably a matter of time on that unless Calipari's holding off on that for any other reasons where that might go away, but I don't think it will. But if it does, or I think it will, we'll come back and talk about that. But this was, and look, the high school talent, those 5 stars, those top 25 guys, you could say Billy Richmond's not a 5-star, but the composite ranking says he is, 25th ranked. Carter Knox, 22nd ranked. McDonald's All-American, 5-star in the composite. Boogie Fland, 15th ranked according to ESPN, 5-star. McDonald's All-American. Plenty of talent there. We've seen what Calipari does with talented freshmen. They can factor in big. But they needed to go get some men, some guys with college experience, Division I experience, high major experience in the case of Adu, and then you've got a guy that's torched high major teams, just had his way against them and been and belongs on the court in those settings. And Johnell Davis, I mean, I just went through it. Some of it was NCAA tournament Final Four run, a year NCAA tournament, two NCAA tournaments ago, and then last year, what he did against high major competition when he faced them in the regular season. His team, in an 8-9 game in the NCAA tournament, lost to Northwestern in the first round this past season. But take nothing away from Nelly Davis based on that, because for the past 2 years, he's been one of the best players in college basketball. Jonas Adu was a bit of a late bloomer in terms of his development, but had that big all SEC season last year. So now Arkansas's got 6 players. I've gone through the names. You've got 3 players out of the portal. Big Z on your front line, 7'2". I think he's going to stretch the floor a little bit. I love the highlights and what I saw of him when I got to see him play, but then going back through his highlights, I think he's a guy that's going to help Arkansas and factor into a 2 deep rotation, especially on that front line. With him and Adu, I think Arkansas is going to add to the front line. I think Arkansas is going to add to the backcourt. But the two big men in the front line, you can play those guys together. I think they're interchangeable as well. So I think there's versatility there. And then now I start talking about the backcourt. I said this recently on one of these segments we did on HogvilleNET YouTube Live. By the way, hit the subscribe button. Please do that for us. We appreciate that. We're trying to drive up our numbers there, and it helps us if you can do that if you haven't already. But this backcourt, I was talking about it in one of these podcasts just recently. If you add a Johnell Davis, once that's official and you actually get him on campus and part of your team, you add him to those high school guys that are coming in that are so highly rated. I mean, you're talking now 6'6", 6'6", 6'4", 6'2", but you've already established yourself with one of the best backcourts in the country coming into college basketball. These guys haven't played together yet, but John Calipari, some of his teams have early ups and downs, mid-season ups and downs, sometimes even tailing into late season, but usually his teams get better. I know the postseason hasn't been what folks thought it should be the last several years, but this guy over an arc of a career, when you talk about 6 Final Fours, 2 title games, a national championship, and some of the other runs, and then regular season success for the most part, despite even recent postseason follies. But I think he understands the importance now of the portal. He's backing that up with these 2 additions in Jonas Adu and Johnell Davis. And so, but the high school part of it, he also excels at it. He understands how to get freshmen to deliver on big stages as freshmen and help them get on to the next level. So I look at this as Arkansas's got 3 out of the portal, 3 out of the high school ranks. It's a good balance already. And now you've got almost half your roster. If Jordan Burke stays on board, like I think he will, let's see what Calipari's plans are there. But he's a guy that's on board otherwise, and maybe that gets announced soon enough. But if that's the case, then you're up to 7. You're more than half your roster now. There's some other guys in play, some other names in play. Okay, coming into the weekend, we were reporting, one of the things I talked about were the 2 big men coming in. Jonas Adu was 1, and Brandon Garrison, he came in first. He was the priority. They brought him in first because he was the priority. He came in on a Saturday. Sunday, it was Brandon Garrison's turn, the freshman from Oklahoma State, former McDonald's All-American. So he was 1A, and I've been reporting it exactly that way. This is nothing new now, not spinning anything based on results, process. In the process of their recruitment, I was telling you how that would play when they were coming in, and one guy was the front, was the top priority, the next guy's right there. And Calipari had a plan to get both. I consistently said, it's hard for me to think they'll get more than one of those guys, but Calipari sees a way, best recruiter of all time. Maybe I should just trust that. One of the things that kept working in my mind about that situation was if it's only one, it might end up being Brandon Garrison. I did think that for a little while. And as momentum picked up onto the Adu thing coming out of the weekend, I thought, wow, Calipari's going to get him. And he's on pace. He had a plan to get both of these guys. But what I kept thinking about was this number I kept hearing that Brandon Garrison's camp kept putting out for their NIL expectation. And it was this consistent number, $800,000. Okay, I'm going to talk about that. This is coming from sources. It's come out from other places since then. But my best sources are Division I coaches, assistant coaches, when we're talking, and we're not talking about their school or their situation, they're great on dishing on the other stuff. And so that stuff was circulating out there on some of these visits. Remember, Brandon Garrison went to OU. He visited Texas, and then it was Arkansas. We knew Kentucky was a school he might be interested in visiting, but never visited there. All right? So coming out of that Arkansas visit, I think from what I was told is the valuations that Texas had and that Arkansas had were well below that $800,000 number. And so I don't think Kentucky had waived anything near what he wanted until it did. And that's what changed the course of everything coming out of the weekend for him. And that commitment that came out earlier today that Brandon Garrison was off the board of Kentucky. So we're not going to spend a lot of time on that. We're really here to talk about Johnell Davis. We've spent nearly 20 minutes doing that. But I think for Kentucky it was twofold. I think because of all the supply of taking players from Kentucky, not only out of the portal with Big Z, but the three high school players, half their high school class. The other three, two of the other three have dispersed. The lowest rated of the guys at Kentucky native is going to stay probably and play for Mark Poe. But all the optics and Arkansas' success so far, I think Kentucky knew it was already out on Johnell Davis, because if I know that he's coming to Arkansas a few days ago, they know it too, more than likely. And so I think they needed some optics of looking like they won a recruiting battle against Arkansas. I guess you could make that argument. He was coming out of the visit. But if you've got other schools with evaluation well below what someone's asking through their camp, and another school really jumps it up and in my opinion, maybe overpaid, proof will be in the pudding later on what a guy does while he's there in some sense. But evaluation based on body of work so far, I think that was the thing that Kentucky jumped all over. They needed a recruiting win. I think they do against Calipari. And here's the other part of that. Here's the other flip of that. If you look at value and you start saying, okay, how do you come to valuations? Well, you might overpay for a guy if he's a big man at 6'11", who was a McDonald's All-American, because big men on the A list of guys that are out there, there's a lot fewer of those than there are backcourt players. So maybe you're overpaying a little bit, but you kind of got that shine of you beat Arkansas. You're trying to get that perception out there and win the day. But also it's a big man. It's not a backcourt guy where I'm not going to say great backcourt players are a dime a dozen, but there's a lot more of them. So you'd rather get an A-lister if they're there like that, and you can jump that money up. But that's what happened there. Okay, so we spent some time on that, a couple or 3 minutes on that. Wanted to kind of explain the dynamics with Adu and Brandon Garrison coming out of the weekend. But Adu was always Arkansas's first priority on that front line, and Garrison would have been nice. I think Calipari again had a plan to get both of those guys. He's done it before at Kentucky and in places he's been. Put A-list frontline guys and backcourt guys and let them play, and he figures out a way to help them get to the league and sort out roles and get enough production from those guys to help build their value for the next stages of basketball, which is for all of them, they want the NBA. So he's one of the best that's been able to do that. And that didn't happen in this time, but again, I don't think Arkansas was going to be in a position to be overpaying for anybody. And so you just kind of let go of the reins on that, let that go, because look, at the end of the day, and we're at the end of the day, it's 10 o'clock. This commitment went public late. At the end of the day, Arkansas beat Kentucky in the portal announcements today. Brandon Garrison to the Wildcats, Johnell Davis, the top portal player to Arkansas. And so, we've been talking about it, that this was coming on a public level. Behind the scenes, this was always, in my opinion, a silent commitment. Private commitment, however you want to phrase it. And now you just keep an eye on what kind of closer can you really get now and move on, that this guy is going to be a Razorback, because his name's in the NBA draft pool. As far as I know, he's always had intentions of testing the water. And I always wondered, is Calipari going to be okay with a public announcement for a guy that's not necessarily all the way in if he's still looking at that option? And so I don't know what arrangements or agreements have been made. If the NIL money truly is north of $1 million, that helps Arkansas's cause, especially for a guy that's not projected, even as an early to mid-second round pick. I think the consensus is he may be a guy that goes undrafted or slides into what. So here's what happens on guys that are going to get two-way deals. Sometimes you'll see a guy get drafted somewhere. Even I've seen it maybe early to mid-second round, where you've got a team that doesn't really want that pick for a player that they're going to try to squeeze onto their 15-man. And so they may work out a deal on the cheap for somebody on behind the scenes, like, look, we'll draft you, but you're going to have to agree to a two-way deal. That's happened before. So you just never know. And there are players that are going to be in there anyway. They're out of, this was pre-NIL, by the way, and they're out of eligibility. They're like, yeah, draft me. I'll do the two-way thing, because otherwise they may not get drafted. Then they're trying to negotiate a free agent deal. So, a lot of this stuff gets worked out pre-draft. And you got players in the draft that want to be actually slide a few spots for a team that actually likes them and has a plan for them, versus someone just because they've got the pick and you're the next guy on the board. They may not love you as much. And so sometimes guys are asking, don't take me here. I'm trying to go here. And so a lot of this stuff gets worked out in weird ways. It's not always what you think. And I spent a lot of time on that to explain that I think Nelly Davis, it's still interesting to know, is he going to stick around through that process? And that'll play out in the next month. That will play out in the next month. The deadline, by the way, to be in the portal tonight, midnight on May 1st. So midnight is what here centrally. I've got 10:09 on my clock. It may be a little bit slow or fast, but so that's fast approaching. I guess it's probably Eastern time. So we're less than an hour if that's the case for players to go in the portal and do that formality. They've got a deadline coming up here. Then you've got the May 29th deadline for college eligible guys eligible to return to college to get out of that NBA draft and come back to school. And so that's about a month. And so, we could learn tomorrow. It might not have come out tonight even, but we may learn as soon as tomorrow that Nelly's pulling out. He's going to withdraw. Everything I've heard is that's probably not likely. He's probably going to stick through there and see where that goes. And so Calipari then, in my opinion, with 6 guys publicly committed now, maybe 7 when we count Jordan Burks. Again, I think he's on board. It's just a matter of what's holding up an announcement on that. Is there something else going on there? And I'm not trying to telegraph that I think there is. I'm just saying we just don't know yet. Until they become public, I start questioning things the longer it goes, based on hearing something 2 weeks ago that it was basically a commitment and just a matter of time before it gets announced. But I think you've got to continue to recruit to your backcourt. I think Arkansas has obviously made a steep commitment from what I'm hearing to Johnell Davis from the NIL side, but I don't know that completely closes the door on his pro stuff. If he feels like he can parlay that into go ahead and get into that pro career, and it seems more lucrative to him than whatever the NIL might be. I just don't know where that is. Again, I'm repeating myself. Thank you for joining me on HogvilleNET YouTube Live. We've got a lot of content. My recruiting tracker over there at hogville.net on the jump ball forum. You could also go to our basketball recruiting forum. We got a lot of information about players that Arkansas is recruiting out of the portal. Some of the guys that are still with Kentucky. It was very interesting because John Calipari was in Pittsburgh. He posted a photograph sitting around with some buddies in Pittsburgh, hanging out with old friends from his old stomping grounds. But there's several players in that area that Arkansas is recruiting not only out of the portal but out of the high school ranks for class of 2025. And so you're multitasking. By the way, today was the last day of the recruiting period for coaches that can be out on the road and recruiting. So you understand why he was maybe trying to hit 1, 2, 3, or 4 possibilities. Will Riley, class of 2025, 5-star, has Arkansas in his top 5 schools because of John Calipari now coaching the Razorbacks. Malik Thomas, a top 10 rated 5-star guard out of Pittsburgh, Lincoln High School, I believe, just picked up an Arkansas offer. I think he's ranked 7th in ESPN's top 10, a 5-star. He's verbalized a desire to visit Arkansas among maybe 2 or 3 schools he wants to set up some upcoming visits with. It makes sense why Calipari would want to be out there to see him. When you start looking at the portal, Leedsdale, Pennsylvania native, Adu Thero, who's in the portal, played for Calipari for 2 years. Maybe he's there to hang with him and his family. But he's a guy that, has Arkansas, North Carolina, Indiana, Pitt, and a potential return to Kentucky in his 5 decisions. So he's another guy that you may be looking at there in terms of being up there to see him. And so, again, today's the last day of the recruiting period. It goes into a quiet period for the month of May. So you can still have players come on campus. It's not a dead period. Players can come visit you, but you've got to maximize your opportunities to go out and see players on their turf. Be there to do that. And that helps you get them on campus then. So just because we slip out of the recruiting period, and there'll be some live eval, there'll be some exceptions during May. One of those will be one of the grassroots, one of the weekends, I think it's May 17th or the 19th. Coaches will be able to go out to these different shoe events, Nike, Adidas, 3SSB, Nike, YBL, Under Armour, and some of the other ones. Those are your 3 top ones, main ones. But coaches will have some live eval opportunity there. They'll also be able to attend the combine in May. So there'll be opportunities to go see things, but you're in those live eval things, and you're not actually able to go to players' homes or their schools or things like that. That's over with now for the month of May, but players can come and visit. So I spent some extra time on that because recruiting is not just about filling up this class, even though that's the top priority. There's a lot of stuff going on. We've been talking about it during some of these segments and going through some of that stuff. But let's jump back to Johnell Davis. Hit the subscribe button if you haven't already. That we appreciate that here at HogvilleNET YouTube Live. Johnell Davis, now it's public, committed to the Arkansas Razorbacks, #1 player in the portal. When I go back and watch, I hope you go and watch his film and footage. I included some in my article that I put out tonight, the official commitment article. But I hope you go back and take a look at his game, because there's just not a lot of there's not a ton of lack of understanding on how to play the game at the college level by this guy. I'm really impressed with his reads, his talent and ability to execute, but his understanding of how to play the game and that it's not always about him. He can go get his, he can carry you as a scorer, but he'll get off the ball again. 3 assists per game, 18 points, and just some just mega sledgehammer games against high major teams that were ranked, spanning the past 2 seasons, last year and when he really broke in onto the scene in the NCAA tournament. He had a good regular season as a junior, but all his numbers went up in the NCAA tournament. So he did not shy away from the big stage. He gets bigger and blows up on the big stages. So when you watch his confidence, I think is what comes out when you watch the footage. He's not a guy that's erratically using talent. He's a little bit erratic, or maybe doesn't make the wise decision, but his talent helps him finish. He's a guy that seems pretty measured, and determined and confident, and then he's got the skill and the talent to back it up. He's a self-made guy. He's consistently gotten better every year, built himself in a player. It's almost got an old school feel to it. A guy that's matured each season and gotten better and better and better. You don't always see guys that stick around that long in the mid-major. You see more of it, and you do see guys like him emerge. But this guy is just a serious, serious talent. And I'm not saying the NBA folks are missing anything on him. They do a good job of evaluating that. Sometimes they miss stuff, but if he's not if he's not a lock for the first 45 picks, and there's thought that he may go undrafted and be then trying to prize out a two-way deal, which he probably could get, then you've got to say, okay, here's why you need to stay in school. Come play here. Calipari is one of the best at developing guys and getting them exposure and getting ready in one season to make that jump to the NBA. A little bit different because he's not a freshman, but also the NIL. If the NIL is north of $1 million, if that's true, then you start offsetting some of the selling points for staying in there. Once you get to a point where all the feedback comes back and you're like, well, looks like I'm probably not going to get drafted. Looks like I'm going to have to fight for a two-way deal and go from there. We've seen guys make it work not getting drafted. You look at the Reeves kid from Arkansas that ended up with the Lakers on an undrafted free agent deal, and got a really nice contract pretty quickly. So that they're fewer and far between guys betting on themselves and it working out. And in his case, because of the COVID year, Davis has a path back to playing college basketball, and that'll be at Arkansas based on his commitment. The weekend visit, they did a really good job of keeping under wraps. And then, again, going back a few days, it was pretty clear to me that he was committed to Arkansas. And I think the exciting thing, again, is you look at the last 24 hours, everybody that's so zeroed in on Calipari's high school recruiting, because he's the best to ever do it. And you've seen people take shots at his understanding of portal, how it's important. Every coach has hits and misses in recruiting, including the high school level. Calipari's not batting 1,000 in his career, but he's the best. He's batting better. His percentages are better than anybody. He's had success out of the portal. He's had some success there. You can point to postseason, and that's valid a little bit, but look at the regular season last year for Kentucky. You had a balance. You had some good freshmen, guys that are going to go in the lottery out of that backcourt. Rob Dillingham and Reed Shepard. But you also had Antonio Reeves, who was a prolific scorer, mid-major transfer 2 years ago, played at Kentucky for a couple of years, put a lot of points on Arkansas in these last 2 seasons, one of the better scorers in the SEC. And then you had last year, what was it, Trey Mitchell that they got out of the portal, that was a regular in that starting lineup and helped that team. Kentucky was ranked top 10 on much of the season, top 20. So it was a ranked team, I think, wire to wire. I might be misspeaking there, but I don't know that they ever fell out of the polls. They had a really good regular season, finished tied for second in the league, one game behind SEC champion Tennessee. So Calipari hasn't forgotten how to coach. Postseason, yeah, we could talk a little bit about that, but his players are succeeding. And the postseason's not going to define their careers, and it's not defining his ability to help guys get to the next levels. And I think that's why you're seeing all this trust in him. The guy was a perfect 5 of 5 before Brandon Garrison, before Kentucky spoiled that by just what I think is escalated a thing and overpaying. The guy hasn't even visited there. That's happened before too with guys. Arkansas's had commitments in the past out of the portal where guys haven't visited, but usually a guy of that caliber, they typically will take their time a little bit and make sure, and so they do visit. I just think the bag got to a point where we see that was the most important thing probably there based on source information I have, and so Kentucky responded and sweetened it to a point where it was well beyond what the others were willing to do. So I like it that Arkansas is Calipari's not going to be on a yo-yo for anybody. He's going to do where he sees the value and play it out the way he thinks it needs to be done. And so I think that's what happened here. Okay, so Arkansas now 6 players on board. The Razorbacks under John Calipari knocking it out of the park. 5 stars on the high school level. All 3 of them, if you look at some version of how services rate players in the top 25 of the high school ranks, all 3 of them, and each one of them brings something special to the table. And that's nothing unusual for what Calipari brings from the high school ranks. Now he's doing it at Arkansas. And then you look out of the portal, man. I mean, Big Z, 7'2", Jonas Adu, 6'11", Johnell Davis, 6'4". You've got backcourt pieces. You've got frontline pieces. And I think now when I start really thinking about Arkansas's roster, what I'd like to see some more, guys like Adu Thero, Jordan Burks, both of them 6'8"ish, can play the 3, can play a 3-4 combo, can give you different looks, give Calipari different options on how he matches up with his front lines. Having several 7-footers or close to it's great, especially versatile ones. But you may need to, based on matchups or other things you can bring to the table, have some guys that can be kind of tweeners, defend multiple positions, including wings, because your 7-footers aren't really going to do much of that. They're not going to be able to do a lot of defending on guards and other, if they get switched or whatever the scenario that happens. But some of these other guys can, like a Adu Thero and potentially a Jordan Burke. So you want some of those types of guys in there. I think the front line, I'd like to see some beef, a wide body, a banger, a player that could be physical. I don't know if you have to step down in terms of quality. Can you find someone like that still that's an A-lister? Do you need to go down to a 1B, 1C type of option there? I don't know, but height, I still feel like there's probably going to be another 6'10" or taller guy that Calipari gets. You could get a guy, there's a guy out there, Grant Nelson back to Alabama. I'm not going to say Kason Pryor is Grant Nelson 2.0, but he is 6'10", a forward out of South Florida, 13 points, 8 rebounds per game, 35% from 3. That is solid for a 6'10" guy, over 81% from the free throw line. What I like about him was 12 double-doubles this last year. Started 21 of 32 games. So basically started 2/3 of the games, but even playing off the bench. I mean, you had 12 double-doubles for Kason Pryor. And then he's had multiple games. I think he had over 10 or 11 games where he made at least 2 3-pointers. And at 6'10", that's not, so there's some versatility there. And he's a guy to me that if you brought him and got him on that front line, maybe not the banger so much, but he's a big-time rebounder based on the minutes played when you look at those 8 rebounds per game. And I think, maybe there's a strong guy, maybe a big-bodied guy, a banger type, a guy that can play a physical brand of basketball on the front line. Maybe Calipari identifies somebody like that still for your front line. I think you ought to go get another scoring guard potentially, especially not knowing what might happen with Johnell Davis and the pro prospects, just for insurance. I think you've got to fill your roster out. If it's me, I'm trying to get all 13 scholarships filled because of injuries and anything else that might come up that prohibits you from having enough bodies to practice and getting through games. Sometimes it's not just about the total numbers, but the depth at each position. So if you've got 2 or 3 players here at each position, you're one injury away and some foul trouble away from now you're really changing everything you do. So you want to kind of stock up if you can. If you can get 13, in most programs, even as high of level as Calipari recruits at, he always has back end guys that are not projected to be one and done. So he always has role players and guys that aren't necessarily clocking in every game in a two deep rotation. So they're out there, and those guys could be available. I do see Big Z as I think it's still in his development, only 15 games in to his career. I'm not quite certain yet who else Calipari is going to backfill the front line with. So I'm not exactly sure I'm comfortable predicting a role for him. But he's a guy that I see, he's 11, 12 minutes a game last year, Big Z. He's a guy I could see you can up the ante to that anywhere from 16, 17 minutes, maybe into the mid 20s, again, depending upon what Calipari brings in on that front line. Because Jonas Adu, 25 minutes a game last year at Tennessee, that was enough for him to be effective on that team and be an all SEC player and one of the better defenders in college basketball. Could he have a similar minute production? Could that increase a little bit? Again, Calipari's the kind of guy that's going to try to load up even on that front line. I don't think we're done. Obviously, we're not done with the roster. He's 6 in publicly, 7 more to go announced publicly. I think we're going to see plenty more size on the wings and in the front court. And then I would say a lead guard. There's Arkansas's looking at some Kadari Richmond out of Seton Hall. Big 6'6" guard, not a 3-point shooter. Low efficiency there, 27%, but 16 points per game, 7 rebounds, over 5 assists, over 2 steals. I mean, this guy's he's just a bull out there. You talk about somebody that, he plays a bully ball brand. He's a smart player. He's a tough player. Playing in the Big East, you have to be and put up those kind of numbers. 44% from the field is respectable overall. Over 80% at the free throw line. So, you've got a really good player at Kadari Richmond. Maybe Arkansas looks at him, maybe there's something in play there. I know Arkansas's contacted him. I don't know where that might be, but I think it would help Boogie Fland as a true freshman who's a combo guard, will play a lot on the lead guard. And then DJ Wagner. I haven't heard a lot of momentum. It may be on the down low for a reason. I know he visited USC. He's got a girlfriend that's in school out there. I really haven't behind the scenes heard any great momentum that Arkansas is about to splash with him. But it wouldn't surprise me one bit if it happened, because he's obviously had signed with Coach Cal to play at Kentucky. His second option was Kenny Payne at Louisville, who's now the associate head coach. Great family relationships there. Doesn't mean that Arkansas is that's where it's going to land. And again, I haven't heard a ton of momentum that it will, but it very well may be someone who's in play there to play a lead guard spot. He did a good job. He had some injury problems with that ankle, had some good games at Kentucky, a better than 2-to-1 assist ratio, nearly 3.5 assists per game as a true freshman, 10 points per game as a true freshman, 3-point shooting just under 30%. You want to see that get better from your backcourt, your 6'3" guard there. But he's a good free throw shooter, and he's just a guy that I think when you look at the better than 2-to-1 assist ratio playing in the SEC, has been a pretty good decision maker on the court, if not as efficient shooter. And he was overshadowed a little bit by guys that perform better on his own team and the backcourt, other freshmen that are going to go in the lottery. That's okay. That doesn't mean this guy can't have a solid career. Could he be en route to Arkansas? Again, I haven't personally heard a ton of momentum on that, but it makes sense that Arkansas might be the first option. Just looking at it on paper and the historical stuff we just talked about with the family ties going back before him with his dad, playing for Calipari. And I just think that it makes more sense than any other destination based on those relationships. By the way, he did not enter his name into that draft pool. He's not on that list. And I think people thought it was probably headed that way, that he wouldn't be. So that's a fact. He's not on the list. So that's not a consideration for him. Now it's about who's going to get him, who's going to make the right play to get him. How does NIL factor into a DJ Wagner? So don't rule him out as a lead guard potential with already 1 year college experience. I mentioned Kadari Richmond. I don't know where that is with Arkansas right now, other than initial contact, other than he's a fantastic big lead guard. And Calipari's had success with big lead guards before. He's had success with just about every kind of player you can imagine. Trezarian White, UNC Wilmington, 6'7" forward, kind of a tweener there, really a wing, a small forward wing type. Big time scorer, 20 points per game last year. Also a good rebounder, 7 rebounds per game at North Carolina Wilmington. Calipari got a taste of that in Rupp Arena when Wilmington came in there and upset top 10 ranked Kentucky in early December, and he had 27 in that game. Arkansas was struggling in non-conference, lost to North Carolina Greensboro, North Carolina mid-major in late November, and then in November, and now you're playing another North Carolina team in the mid-major level in Wilmington that had already upset a ranked Kentucky team. Arkansas won that game at home by 16 points, but Trezarian White had 28 in that game. So it's a prolific scorer, a guy that's banged heads against high majors and put up big numbers. Arkansas did make initial contact. There's reporting out today that he's down to a Final Three that does not include Arkansas. I believe it was Baylor, TCU, and Mississippi State. I believe those were the 3 teams. So, things can change in recruiting, but there's that. I mentioned Case and Pryor. It's been kind of quiet on him. You hear some murmurs about Arkansas maybe advancing in terms of his interest. Don't know how real that is. We talked about him, the 6'10" forward out of South Florida. By the way, South Florida won that American Athletic Conference. I think they went like 16-2. I think they only lost 2 games and then lost. One of those games was to Alabama Birmingham. Apparently a bad matchup because Birmingham defeated South Florida in the postseason tournament for the AAC. So didn't have a strong enough resume. Didn't have a great non-conference record, South Florida. So it was the NIT, and I think they went 1-1 in the NIT. But Pryor, again, really good season for him. Keep an eye on Sean Stewart, the McDonald's All-American from the class of 2023. Duke transfer, good rebounder for his limited minutes. Efficient from the field in his limited field goals that he made. I think he's a guy that Arkansas, that he kind of fits when I watch him and things he brings to the table. He kind of fits to me what kind of players that Calipari covets. And he was a McDonald's All-American. We know Calipari loves getting on those guys. And then, another name I don't think I've talked about here tonight. I did the previous one of these. Wooga Poplar, a 6'5" guard out of Miami. Also a Philadelphia native. He's another guy that, who knows, Calipari was in Pennsylvania and Pittsburgh. Maybe that was part of his rounds while he was there before the current recruiting period went away. But 13.8 points per game, 4.8 rebounds, 2.1 assists, 43% from the field, 38.5% from 3. That's really good. Over 86% from the free throw line. But he's a guy that Arkansas has also contacted. That came out recently. So those are just some of the names. The most recent transfer that I've seen that Arkansas made outreach to, I reported on today, or I put it in my recruiting tracker, that is, over on HogvilleNET. Elijah Saunders, 6'8" forward, 240 pounds, out of San Diego State. Now, when you look at his stats, you don't think much of it. He was a sophomore, two seasons left of eligibility. Most of these names I've talked about have only 1 more year left. He's got 2 more. But the sophomore averaged 6.2 points, 3.6 rebounds, 41% from the field, 32% from 3. And when you look at those stats, you're not blown away. But one of those guys that I think could fill in that 6'8", 240, maybe he can go in there and bang a little bit, be a physical guy. But again, San Diego State, one of the best mid-major programs out there. We know that. So it's a top-level program. And he's a guy that Arkansas has contacted. So, for what it's worth, there's another frontline guy as we talk about some of Arkansas's needs. Great Osabor. It was thought Kentucky was going to have him in and nail him down, and it was Brandon Garrison. They've already got Amari Williams on that front line. Another 6'10" guy that can shoot a little bit. What's his name? I've already gone blank on his name. Just committed in the last couple of days. But so they've, Kentucky on the front line. I don't know. We'll see what other names might emerge for frontline candidates to package with Adu and Big Z. And then again, I went through it. I think at least 1 more lead guard, possibly 2 combo guards out of the portal would be nice. and a couple, at least two more true frontline guys. And Calipari's, he's not a guy that it's not someone that you're worried about in recruiting, being able to go and identify what he needs and then go and get one of the top level guys for that position. He's just really good at it. All right, so we're 50 minutes in. Thank you for joining me on HogvilleNET YouTube Live. It's late. We're past 10:30. It was a late public commitment tonight from Johnell Davis, 6'4" guard out of Florida Atlantic. Number one player in the portal off to the Razorbacks. That, and then just yesterday, Jonas Adu, one of the top 10, 15 portal players, 6'11" forward center out of Tennessee, all SEC performer. You've just hit, to me, Johnell Davis is a grand slam home run. Jonas Adu is a home run at minimum. You could make an argument if it's a grand slam or not. Maybe it's a 3-run dinger, two-run, multiple runs scored on it. However you want to phrase it, I think these were big time gets for the Arkansas Razorbacks out of the portal after having 3 from the high school ranks, 5 stars, and then you started things off with Big Z out of Kentucky's portal. We probably left some names out. I will hit you with some Arkansas information. I told you recently, I've heard from multiple sources that Devo Davis is privately committed to Oklahoma State. I don't know why that's not public, and maybe he's maybe he's not 100% sure yet and hasn't gone public for that reason. Nothing surprises me in recruiting. Nothing surprises me in the portal. Nothing surprises me with Devo Davis. So I'll say all of that. I think we're going to hear more about Layden Blocker in the next week or two. I don't think Arkansas is in the mix there, but anything can happen. Things can change. At time, we'll be done tonight, and tomorrow's a new day. Who knows what could shake out there? But I don't think it's moving in a direction where Arkansas is in the mix. I think there's probably some high majors and mid majors that have been looked at there, and then we'll see what happens there. Caleb Battle, who's in the portal, took visits to TCU and Kansas State. He put photos out, and this was last week on his social media. Was told maybe he took a trip up to Philly to the old stomping grounds where he played at Temple. Maybe was visiting Villanova. I've not been able to confirm that. Maybe there's something out there that I've missed that confirmed it. And I think I reported on that yesterday morning when I came on. So those are the Razorbacks that are in the portal. Bay Fall, the McDonald's All-American in 2023. Freshman last year, barely saw the floor for Arkansas. He went into the portal. I think he was the last Hog in there, and he's already committed to Kansas State and Jerome Tang. So good luck to him. And then in Kentucky's portal, we've talked about Adu Thero. We know Big Z is already off to Arkansas. Jordan Burks is in the portal. I think he's one of those, quiet, private commits, and it's just a matter of time before that gets announced, unless Calipari's shifting gears in another direction. But aside from those names, you've also got the recent entry for Ugana Onyenso, who, by the way, said he was going to go in the draft and hire an agent. And then he gets in the portal just a few days ago. We know the deadline to get in, it's coming up here in a few minutes where you can't do that anymore. He was on that list of names that were not early entrants. So unless there's some kind of clerical error there, and sometimes there are on these things and it gets cleaned up, and later you find out some of these names you were told weren't on the list by the deadline, they actually had already started their process and they got left out. Unless that's the case, he's also a Kentucky guy who's not on that entry list. In addition to DJ Wagner, so you've got him out there. I've got nothing to tell me that Arkansas is in play there. But Arkansas did not finish up getting Brandon Garrison. I think Cal thought he was getting 2 guys with Adu and Garrison, and I told you how that played out. So you never know how things can circle back around to a guy. He's a 7-footer, played 2 years for Cal, big-time rim protector, nearly 3 blocks per game in just under 19 minutes last year. So you just never know. I mean, I have nothing that tells me that's in the works. If there are any other high school players at this point, to me, it's got to be guys getting out of their letters of intent or commitments if they haven't already signed. Most players have by now, and it would be one of those things where they just decide, hey, I didn't know Calipari was going to end up at Arkansas. I didn't know some of these other things going on necessarily. The NIL money sounds good over there. Maybe I get out of a letter of intent and wiggle on, and so something like that would have to happen for Calipari to be pulling any more players, in my opinion, from anywhere other than the portal at this point. I think it's pretty obvious, but I thought it was worth saying that you never know what weird paths can lead players to your team. We've seen some funky stuff play out over time that we didn't see coming. So I like to kind of go down those rabbit holes sometimes just to throw it out as a what if. Thank you again for joining me on HogvilleNET YouTube Live, almost an hour in. Some of you are hanging in there with me. Johnell Davis to the Arkansas Razorbacks. How happy are you about that? Normally, I screw up with the comments. I saw a few come over early, and then I didn't address any of them, and some folks have probably stopped on it. But I think you're probably pretty happy that you got Johnell Davis and going to get him in an Arkansas Razorback uniform, barring some opportunity with the NBA and the pros that already doesn't seem obvious. Something would have to drastically change there, I think, to keep him out of Arkansas uniform, Razorback uniform. If the NIL's what we talked about, a million or more wherever. I mean, I had someone tell me earlier today they heard it was 1.5 million, north of 1.5 million. That seems unlikely to me, but I mean, I don't know. How would I know? I mean, I had a D1 coach I was talking to a couple of days ago. I might have mentioned it yesterday morning when I was on. That was going through some of the stuff, and he has a really good feel and a lot of connections. And he's saying, man, a lot of these numbers you're hearing are it's just braggadocious, and it's not even close to what guys are really getting. He said there may be some exceptions, but for the most part, a lot of it's like that. But if there's someone just said he's going pro. I mean, that's a real possibility. Every time I've talked about this as a private commitment, and then tonight, now that it's public, I've told everyone, not that I'm trying to be preachy, or negative, but you have to understand if his name is in that NBA draft, and that's something every player wants to get to that next level as soon as possible. That's the bag they really want. But NIL helps players make those decisions when the reality might not be that the path to get to that bag is necessarily right there in front of them. Some guys are going to do it anyway and just start focusing on the program, finish up with school. Now they can finish strictly on being a pro, spend more time on basketball, and start learning the NBA game and the pro game because it's a different game than the college game. What makes college more competitive now and keeping guys is NIL. And maybe Johnell does have a really nice bag to come in Arkansas. It's got to be one of the best out there. $1 million? I don't know. 1.5 million, 1.6 million? Okay, but to me, those calculations start to tell a guy that's projected as maybe an undrafted two-way guy, I need to stick one more year, make this bag, and I can always do this in a year from now because he'll be out of eligibility at that point. And then maybe you've improved your draft stock. Maybe Calipari's helped you do that. So you made the NIL money, and you're in a better position to make more money on your initial deal. And if not, you're still got a chance at a two-way, and you still got an opportunity to do what guys like Austin Reeves and more recently Ricky Council IV did. Reeves' deal is a lot better than Ricky's, but sometimes there's an advantage there if you prove yourself because you're not locked into one of those 4-year deals like some of these other guys are where they can't, they're just stuck with that for a few years till they get to that second contract. So, that again, those are fewer and far between. And could Nelly Davis be the kind of guy that proves himself with one more year of college and helps himself there? Maybe that's also on the table. All right, we're going to cap it off here at an hour. We've covered just about everything. I think obviously the big news late. I'm dragging a little bit tonight, probably not as peppy as I am when I'm normally on here. I'm a little tired. I can feel it and hear it in my voice, actually. But Nelly Davis, the number one transfer portal prospect, has committed to Arkansas Razorback. This is further proof, in my opinion, that John Calipari is the best recruiter of all time, best recruiter right now, still in the college game. And now we got to see can he really lock it up and keep this guy from wandering in and staying into that NBA draft. Those are things I'm not sure about as we do this tonight. And it may be we got to wait through the month to see what happens. And anytime that's on the table and a guy's not on campus yet, which wouldn't be the case even if he wasn't in the draft pool right now, you're still going to have other programs trying to figure a way in. And that happened to Arkansas with Eric Melsman and Isaiah Moss. I just throw that out there. I've talked about it a little bit. There's more than just the pro thing that could spoil this, but I doubt now that it's public, it makes it less likely to me that this guy wants to be on the market still. He's probably happy with what he's getting from Arkansas in terms of the college part of it, but you just never know. Again, Kentucky went from nowhere to dropping a big bag on Brandon Garrison, and he committed on the spot without even visiting. So things happen. All right, just rolled an hour. Thanks again for joining me on HogvilleNET YouTube Live tonight. If you haven't hit the subscribe button, please do. But until next time, I'll see you then.